As someone who has advised a number of Republican leaders, put this into some context for us. How important is this to what's going on with the Republican Party and the White House at this point?
Well, look, there's so much news these days that it's often difficult to tell the signal from the noise. But this is an extremely big deal. President Trump's election victory and his administration have relied on an often uneasy alliance between conventional Republicans and the more nationalist wing led by or represented by Steve Bannon. An utter break between Bannon and the White House is a very big deal in terms of the consequences going forward for the president's agenda, the future of the administration, and Trumpism itself.
And what ramifications might this have for the president's agenda up on Capitol Hill? Does it affect his standing as he's dealing with Republicans and, for that matter, Democrats as well, for example, in getting refunding of the government later this month?
I think that it changes the dynamics of his agenda in terms of his priorities. I think that you'll see less emphasis on the more nationalist portions of the agenda, the assaults on free trade, the assaults on the so-called deep state, and more emphasis on some of the president's either traditional Republican or even Democratic-leaning priorities, like, for example, a large infrastructure bill.
So, as I say, you've spent time up on Capitol Hill with John Boehner when he's Speaker of the House. Is this a win, as it were, for example, Mitch McConnell, who was no friend, certainly, of Steve Bannon's and was hoping that the president would come more toward what we might call the mainstream of the Republican Party?
Yes, I think that Senator McConnell and his team are extremely happy. I think that particularly in the Alabama Senate race, Steve Bannon was seen as someone who was working against the best interests of Senate Republicans, working against the best interests of having a governing majority that can get things done for the American people. He was a disruptive element. He was backing candidates who, pretty spectacularly, could not win because they were loathsome kooks.
Well, then, by extension, is it possible this could be bad news, actually, for the Democrats? If, in fact, President Trump were to move more toward the center of the Republican Party, is it possible he could be more effective and more popular than he has been?
I think it's possible. I think that having some sort of regular cadence to governing, having a feeling of responsibility and respectability would help. At the same time, I think that the tax bill was the last big-ticket legislative item that's going to happen on a party line vote, at least in the next year and a half. I think that what is going to have to happen for progress to be made on big issues like infrastructure and immigration is bipartisan efforts, and I think that will indeed be easier because Mr. Bannon is no longer part of the picture.
Finally, Michael, take us forward to November when we have the midterm elections. Whatever probability you might put on the Democrats taking the House and or the Senate away from the Republicans, the Democrats taking it back, is that number gone up or gone down?
It's gone down, and it's gone down substantially because eliminating Bannon as a political force eliminates a concern about divisive primaries that leave Republicans weakened going into the general election.